So who are you? What's your role and where do you work?
Hi, yeah, my name is Raglan Anthony. I go by Rags. I'm a special solutions architect at AWS. I work in the media and entertainment, gaming and sports industry, and I'm based in London.
Very good. Yes, you're based in London. I'm based in Spain.
Lovely.
It's not too far away. What part of London are you in?
Well, I work in the London office in Holborn.
Okay.
And home is in Reading.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool, good. Now, what are 3 emerging Kubernetes tools that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so emerging tech, I guess the obvious one going to be like, KRO, Kube Resource Orchestrator. There's a lot of changes happening in that space. We've recently had EKS capabilities supporting that. So I'm really interested to see how that project grows, how the community adds to that in terms of, bringing together further automation within Kubernetes clusters. The second that I'm looking at is Queue, more specifically multi-queue for job scheduling. So I spend a lot of time working through like AI, ML workloads and in terms of like training jobs. And with the consumption in terms of GPU usage, multi-queue seems like an interesting package to be able to utilize clusters across different regions. And the last one that I'm interested in is KubeVirt. So yeah, KubeVirt's really interesting to me. Specifically, we've recently had EC2 support nested virtualization. So I'm keen to see how we can use KubeVirt to manage virtual machines within EC2.
What are the options for organizations with regulatory requirements that prevent immediate cloud adoption, but want modern Kubernetes practices?
Yeah, so for organizations that work in regulated environments where data residency, sovereignty, and auditability is almost like a non-negotiable, there's a couple of options, I would say, for running Kubernetes. The first one would be, a fully like DIY self-managed Kubernetes cluster using tools like kubeadm. That'll give you full control of the entire stack, control plane and data plane. But that also comes with the operational process for managing those clusters. You could also use vendor managed solutions, and that brings some tooling to take away some of the operational processes with a DIY type of cluster. But then you're working within the boundaries of what that particular vendor supports. From an AWS perspective, we've got a couple of options as well. So you could start with AWS Outposts, where it's AWS managed infrastructure in your data center. And then you get a very cloud-like experience on premises, but then that comes also at a higher cost and a longer lead time to get the cluster up and running. Another option is EKS hybrid nodes. So hybrid nodes is, your infrastructure in your data center being used as worker nodes, and where we've got the control plane running in AWS via EKS. And that's a great option to, leverage AWS from a control plane perspective and still give you control over the worker nodes on premises. And the last deployment option I would say is EKS Anywhere. And EKS Anywhere is going to give you AWS tooling and AWS APIs on premises. It's suitable for air-gapped environments. So that means you're going to be running the data plane and the control plane on premises.
For teams already running Kubernetes on-prem, what are some operational challenges they face on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, okay. So control plane management, I guess, is the big one. So patching, upgrades, scaling, securing the control plane, that's all on your team. The other, I would say, is networking. So, especially when you've got multi-clusters, being able to manage your IP ranges, being able to handle your DNS across cluster services, that can become complex, especially when you also need to call out to like cloud services. Another sort of low-level anxiety could be like certificate management. It's very easy for that to stall cluster operations. Identity and access management can become a bit fragile because if teams don't have a process in order to handle identity and access management, it's very easy to fall onto like static kube config files, maybe using a managed service account of some sort, possibly even getting to the point where you've got a bolted on OIDC. And then observability is another piece where teams are stitching together multiple tools and running observability tools in the clusters that they're meant to be observing.
How does networking work when applications running on-prem need to communicate with services running in the cloud?
Yeah, so when applications on premises need to communicate on cloud, they need a network path that can bridge, these two otherwise isolated environments. The simplest way is going to be, public traffic routed over the public internet using HTTPS encryption. But then you're at the liberty of the internet variability when you go down that path. A more private and secure option could be a VPN solution like AWS site-to-site VPN. And that will create a seamless network between your on-premises environment and your VPC in cloud. And then for like a high throughput, low latency, highly reliable network connection, you could use AWS Direct Connect. And that's a physical cable that connects your data center and AWS. It bypasses the internet completely. It's suitable for like production workloads, It's also suitable for compliance-related workloads. Either which way you go, with whichever path you choose, you got to still figure out DNS. DNS is always a requirement to make sure that on-premises is able to resolve those cloud host names. Yeah, so that's pretty much how the networking would work.
Now, AWS launched EKS hybrid nodes. So how does it address the above operational challenges across multiple environments?
Yeah, so EKS hybrid nodes, I would say directly addresses pretty much most of the challenges, if not all, that we've just spoken about. The first one being control plane in terms of being able to do the scaling, the security, the hardening of the entire environment, patching and upgrades. That's all taken care of by AWS. So that burden of control plane management is completely gone. The second piece is identity and access management. So EKS hybrid nodes would integrate natively into IAM from AWS and would leverage things like EKS pod identity for security in terms of accessing AWS services, or you could use IAM roles for service accounts as well. In terms of the networking, so it'll use your existing networking structure if you're using VPN or if you're using Direct Connect. So you're not having to rewire your entire network in order to access AWS services. You're using an already configured environment and just kind of relying on that configuration. Additionally, your nodes in itself stay within the network in your environment. It's on premises. Your pods have their own network, so they're able to communicate with each other. So you're got full control of your nodes. And you can leverage tools like Node ADM, which is a CLI tool from AWS, to handle the upgrades of those nodes. So it simplifies the management in terms of the differences between your control plane and your data plane, while still giving you control of those assets on premises.
Kubernetes turned 10 about 2 years ago. What should we expect in the next 10 years?
So in my opinion, I think more autonomous clusters, self-healing. I think we're seeing a lot of headway that's going on with agents going on in clusters, MCP tools that's also coming out through. And I think we're going to get to a point where cluster operations will become a lot simpler, where you'll be able to create a cluster and hopefully at some point it can automatically upgrade itself and self-heal. I think that's going to be a big focus over the next 10 years.
And Rags, what's next for you?
Well, I hope to be one of the contributors to those autonomous clusters. I spent a lot of time in the media and entertainment space. So the other thing that I'm focusing on there is trying to leverage KubeVirt to start creating editing workstations out in the cloud. So that's something that I'm putting a lot of focus over the next couple of months.
And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
I think the simplest way would be on LinkedIn. I go by Rags, but you can find me on LinkedIn as Raglan Anthony.